Hi everybody. Today I thought we'd make some banana muffins. I've got some bananas that are pretty ripe here, so I thought I'd show you a great recipe. I've tried a number of recipes and this is the best one that I've found. And it takes pretty much everything that you've got in the house. All you're going to need is some ripe bananas, and when you see them turning brown like this, that's a good ripe banana. So we'll get started. First thing we need to get started with is with the bananas. And it's going to call for about 3 large bananas, about a cup and a half. So we'll start with these bananas. And we're just going to use the mixer to mash them. You can use a fork too, but I think I'm going to use the mixer. So we'll get them all peeled and all set to go. The browner they are, the riper they are, the sweeter they are, the more sugar they have in them. So if you make banana muffins with regular bananas that are not overly ripe, they're not going to be near as sweet. You're not going to have as much flavor in your muffins. So we'll start by mashing up the bananas. Start with a fork. These are still a little firm. We'll start like that. I have a stand mixer also, but I choose just to use this little handheld one. It's always handy, easier to get out. Okay. We'll mash them a little more. Okay, now we're going to add in our egg, and I just used a large egg. We're going to add in our brown sugar. It calls for 2/3 of a cup of packed brown sugar. When it's packed, you just push it down into the cup to make sure that it's firm. So we're going to add that in there. And then it also calls for 6 tablespoons of melted butter. So I'm going to add that in. I used the unsalted. And we're going to give that a run with the mixer. Much to do with this recipe. Now we're going to go to our dry ingredients, and it calls for a cup and a half of flour. You can also use wheat flour if you have wheat flour. I just used regular flour. And when you get your flour and to make it so that it's not packed down, you don't want your flour packed down. So what you're going to do is take your knife once you get it in there and scoop it off with your knife with your flour, and then you don't have too much added in there, because it does make a difference if it's heaping. You want it level across your measuring cup. So we'll start with that. Go. We've got our baking powder, and it calls for 1 teaspoon. And then it's going to call for 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And I just level it off my container. And then it calls for salt, and it calls for just a half a teaspoon of salt. We'll put that in with the dry ingredients. Calls for a teaspoon of cinnamon. Add our cinnamon right in there. Calls for nutmeg. And with the nutmeg, we're going to put in a half a teaspoon. It's a little bit stronger than what the cinnamon is. So we're going to go with a half a teaspoon of that. And we're just going to take a fork and kind of mix that around. If you want, you can sift these all together. That'll work too. And then that's all going to be into our wet mixture. One thing, we should add in some milk too. So I'm going to add in here some milk. It's about 2 tablespoons of milk. And I'm going to add that in there. And also our vanilla. Our vanilla, it calls for a teaspoon. So we'll get a teaspoon of vanilla in there. Generally, that's what you put in last. That always gives it a... And then I'm just going to mix this up a little more. Pretty simple recipe. Now I'm going to start adding in my flour. And I'm just going to add in a little at a time so that I can get it thoroughly mixed in there. And you can see I'm just taking it from around the sides and incorporating it in. Add a little bit more in. Probably about 1/3 of the flour mixture each time. You can just smell the bananas. And with the cinnamon and the nutmeg, it smells good. Not too hard to mix up if you want to mix them up for breakfast for Sunday morning. So I added about 1/3 of the flour each time. And that is it. This makes about a dozen muffins. That's it. Now what I'm going to use to put it makes about a dozen, and I've got them all lined. My pan's all lined. And we'll start out, I like to use a cupcake scoop. Makes it easier to get them all the same amount. And I'm going to start out with just making the plain ones first. And just scoop it into the muffins. It fills them maybe about 2/3 full. These don't take long to make up at all. Add just a little more in there to make it about 2/3 full. Okay, now the next ones, I'm going to add in about a half a cup, 1/4 to a half a cup of pecans and miniature chocolate chips. I just used Toll House mini morsels, and I'm going to mix that in. And I'll put that in for the next batch. Just about got it here. I've got my oven preheating to 425, and we're going to start them out at 425 for about 5 minutes. After that 5 minutes, you're going to turn it down to 350. There we go. Got them all set. So we'll get these in the oven. 425. After 5 minutes, we'll turn it down to 350. And about another 12 to 15 minutes, and we'll see how they're doing. We'll be back in a little bit. Okay, it's been 5 minutes, so now move your temperature down to 350. And it'll be about 16 to 18 minutes, and just keep an eye on your muffins. 16 to 18 minutes, they'll be all done and ready to eat with some butter. Time's up. I'm going to check them. You can check them with a toothpick, just like you can a cake, to see if they're done. I'm just going to stick it in the middle, and it comes out clean, so they're done. So I'm going to take them out. The ones with the nuts and the chocolate chips seem to have puffed up a little bit more. I must have put a little bit more of the muffin mix in it, of the batter. But they smell delicious. Have the coffee ready. Have your hot tea ready, because you're going to need it. Dish, and then anytime anybody wants to grab one, they can grab them. And let's see what these look like. They smell delicious. You can put butter on it, margarine. They need to cool a little bit. That is delicious. So if you want a fairly easy recipe to make some muffins for breakfast or brunch or even a quick dessert, these didn't take no time to mix up. Enjoy them!